This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. It's hard to beat a good cup of coffee before you're heading out to hunt, shed hunt, or whatever you're doing outside. It's even harder to beat a fresh roast premium coffee that ships out within 6 hours of roasting directly to your doorstep. And that's exactly what Skull Brew Coffee Company does, guaranteeing you the freshest coffee available. The kicker, 10% of proceeds are donated back to conservation. You choose where the donation goes at checkout. You can check us out at skullbrewcoffee.com. And for a limited time, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and get 15% off your purchase. So let's do something good together and help protect wild places one cup at a time. Visit skullbrewcoffee.com and pledge your support of conservation today. Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 108. Today we're rolling on to part 2 of our DIY report, Public Land Trail Camera Strategies. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well out there in whitetail land. Hope everyone's able to get outside a little bit. Finally got a little bit of a weather break this past weekend. It seems like, man, it's been stupid cold and just rainy and or snowy, sleety, icy, nasty, crappy northeast weather for, it seems like, weeks now. So finally got a little bit of nice weather. I was able to actually get outside, shoot my bow outside, which was awesome. Got to do that, which is always a good time to kind of try to stay back into form. I do shoot, pretty often in my basement, just, a couple nights a week I shoot in my basement. I can get about a 15-yard shot off, so it kind of helps me keep my stuff together, but it's always nice to get outside and stretch it out a little bit, and it just kind of make me feel like I'm doing some real archery work. But I did get a chance to, I hope a lot of you have got a chance to do this, but I know just in talking to buddies in different states, they're starting to see some, antlers come off, of course. And shed season is now just starting, I guess, to be upon us. And I'm sure you guys, if any of you that have listened to this for any length of time, have heard me talk about the fact that I am the world's worst shed hunter and had yet to ever find a shed. And part of the reason is that I go into a shed hunt and it turns pretty quickly into a scouting trip. And I know that, finding sheds can be a valuable piece of information, one, to understand, a buck that has made it through the season and would likely, likely be around for the next hunting season, barring any type of, injury, illness, or hit by a car or something like that. So that's obviously a puzzle piece. And then also, if you're finding shed antlers, depending on where you're finding them, you might start to be able to put some pieces together as far as where he's bedding, where he's feeding, at least during the late season, which you would hope maybe that would stay true for the early part of the season as well. So there is some data there to be had from shed antlers. So with all that said, I had a chance to go out with my buddy Tom, from Relive the Hunt. This past weekend, we went shed hunting on a couple. We checked out, the swamp that I'd been hunting and checked that out and kind of gave that a good sachet. Found 0 sheds there, which is of no surprise because I typically don't find sheds. Checked out the other side of the swamp because I wanted to check that out. And I think I found a nice little terrain feature that I want to set up on. But it's weird because there'd been deer in there. And if any of you had listened, earlier to some of the earlier podcasts, I had some good deer in that swamp. And it just, for the caliber of deer that I had on camera in there, there is freakishly very little sign that would tell you that there is any type of bucks in that particular area. So, we'll see what kind of plays out next year, throwing cameras up in there and doing, some more scouting and so forth. But it's not a big piece, and we were pretty much all over it and didn't see a whole lot of signs. So I'm not quite sure what's going on on that piece particularly. So we'll have to wait and see what happens next year. But we did leave that spot and went to a couple places Tom had been shed hunting in the past and had some success. So, and I am happy to report that I finally did find my first shed ever. It was a pretty good shed too for PA. I want to say, I think I found one side, Tom found the other side. And we measured one of the sides and it measured like 53 inches. So, if it's even on both sides roughly, right, you got about a little over 100 inches antler there, some, spread, 16-inch spread, whatever. So for PA, it's probably pretty close to 120-ish inch deer, which, next year should be a really nice deer. So that was kind of exciting to find that. But I'm gonna try to get out and do a little bit more shed hunting. My plan is to hit the property, my dad's property, and make a walkthrough in some of the thicker areas, since I've started to learn just a little bit more about that piece. Hoping I can figure some stuff out there, and hoping that a few shed antlers might be the golden ticket to be, a few of the final puzzle pieces that I need to get on one of the good deer on that property. But without further delay, today we have our part number 2 of our DIY report, Public Land Trail Camera Strategies, with Chad and Jake from Exodus Trail Camera. And today it's a cool session because the first session we did was really about setting up and assessing a property. It's a lot of the similar things you would go through if you're going to hunt a piece of public land. Was that first session. We're talking about gathering inventory and things of that nature, and qualifying a parcel, and basically all the due diligence you should do before you choose to hunt a piece of public land, to make sure it's going to have, 1, the caliber of deer that you want, and 2, the amount or lack of pressure that you're looking for. Today's session is going to be more focused on early season and the pre-rut time period. When and how bucks are changing their travel patterns or their travel corridors when they go hardhorn. Looking at terrain features that they're going to start to use that time of the year. And we talk a little bit about secondary terrain features, which is kind of interesting. Then, of course, a little bit of scrape, rub activity, and so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get Chad and Jake on the line. But before we do that, let's take a quick second to talk about our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. We're brought to you by Wicked Tree Gear, the longest lasting, fastest cutting, toughest tree trimming equipment you have ever used. Simply put, the toughest saws on earth. How tough are they? Tough enough to come with a lifetime warranty. And right now, when you visit wickedtreegear.com, use the promo code TRUTH at checkout and save yourself 20% on your next Wicked purchase. We're also brought to you by Tecumseh Seed. If you guys haven't yet, might want to pick up some clover seed, get ready for frost seeding. No matter if you're in the South, Midwest, or Northeast, Tecumseh Seed has your food plot seed needs covered. That was a lot of seeds and needs. Visit Tecumseh.com, check out the product selector tool, and let them help you pick the right seed for your food plots. Use promo code TRUTH at checkout and save 20%. We're also brought to you by Glacier Coolers, simply the world's finest. Whether you're hunting, camping, fishing, you'll enjoy smarter design, stronger construction, and superior insulation of Glacier Coolers. Visit them at glaciercoolers.com, promo code TRUTH at checkout, save yourself 20%. Now let's get Chad and Jake on the line. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, and we are here with part number 2 of Public Land Camera Strategies with my buddies from Exodus, Chad and Jake. What's going on, fellas?
What's up?
We're still at the Harrisburg Outdoor Show. We haven't left.
It's like Groundhog Day.
It's like
movie Groundhog Day.
It's like Groundhog Day. Yeah, but there's no Bill Murray. Would it be awesome if Bill Murray just showed up?
That would be fun.
It would be amazing. Actually, he's not from Pennsylvania. I think he has an affinity for PA though, for some reason. I think
Groundhog Day was like like last week or this week, wasn't it?
It was this weekend.
Was it?
I think so. I think it was like February 1st.
It was recently
or 2nd.
Because my buddy's like, "You're going to PA?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Dude, you got to go to the see the groundhog."
I had a buddy that was from Punxsutawney, and Punxsutawney is like a really small like little town or whatever, and he's like, Groundhog Day is like the biggest thing that happens to Punxsutawney every year, and it's just like crazy. It's like basically Punxsutawney's version of St. Patrick's Day, essentially, where it's just
like a big party.
Everyone runs amok, and it's just kind of expected. It's a complete shit show. And the groundhog comes out, and everyone gets excited about it. Like,
I got a funny college story, but I'll save it for off the air.
So we're keeping it PG today, kind of.
Yeah, I won't embarrass myself.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dive into part 2 here for camera strategies, and what we're really talking about here. Again, this is kind of, we're focusing on public land, but using some juxtaposition of private land as well. And what we're talking about today specifically is early season and pre-rut, because what we talked about in the first part was really about how are we qualifying a parcel, making sure there's deer that we want to hunt, what are some food sources that we're looking at that we can start to take some inventory, and then using trail cameras like, whether it's food sources, hard edges, beaten trails or whatever, to try to figure out what direction they might be moving and who is on the property and when they're showing up. And so this is really kind of the next phase of that, making a plan as you're kind of maybe you're hunting out of state or whatever the case might be. So now that you have the piece that you're going to hunt, maybe we're getting closer to hunting season, and let's just say we're in late September, right? We're getting ready for the season to actually really kick off, and we're assuming these states are like October openers or whatever, because at some point, some states are opening a little earlier. Where are you hanging and moving your cameras at this point, and how similar is your approach on public as it is to private?
I haven't done a whole lot of private, private stuff in the last couple of years, but Jake can speak on that. But on the public end, as I kind of wrapped up, my strategy through the summer, I started to talk a little bit about those transitioning food sources. So starting, kind of that pre-rut phase, that's kind of still there for me. And then really identifying scrape areas and, I guess, transition areas or staging areas from bedding to food in those kind of high stem count locations where deer are going to kind of hole up. Now, one of the things that I've just recently started doing is using some of that summer intel in relation to doe bedding and kind of identifying some of those doe bedding areas to kind of forecast where those primary scrape opportunities may rise, and then start setting cameras up there.
Okay, interesting. Well, how about you for public?
Honestly, I've had really good luck with licking branches and scrapes in that late September time, in that early October, before there's actual scratches on the ground. And that was on a public piece that I hung. There was a lot of great deer on there, and it's a pretty good way to get a gauge on the bucks in the area. Or if you can do a mock line, and I think that's really undervalued to that September, October. People aren't really thinking about it because they're physically not seeing them yet.
Right, and the funny thing is that you mentioned that because I've heard, it might have even been Jeff Sturgis talking about that.
He's big on them, yeah.
Yeah, because he was, I think it was him I was talking to, where he was saying that, folks get all geeked up whenever it hits like mid-October to really start like their mock scrapes and stuff like that and licking branches and stuff like that. He's like, but man, they can be money earlier in the year. And that was even one thing talking to Zach Fehrenbaugh. He was like, man, deer are making sign all year round. He's like, you're just not seeing it. You know what I mean? Or it's in places where you're not typically looking, or you're not in the woods as often because it's not hunting season.
Right.
He's like, but they're constantly communicating because that's how they communicate. It's not like they just stop talking to one another.
Right.
I'm curious, are you starting at this point to focus any at all on travel corridors, either of you, like whether it's public or private? Are you starting to see how they're going to start to move a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to some of those hub cameras on benches or terrain features, again, I'm going to gather that intel, how those deer were using it over, the summer months, correlated to what I think the bedding opportunity is going to be in the fall. And again, I'm dropping pins on like Onyx, so what Google Earth or whatever, I'm dropping pins to forecast what I think is going to happen, and then I'm proving that thesis or theory with the camera data that I'm gathering. So, travel corridors on hard edges and soft edges, like going to those kind of major terrain features like those deep saddles, those benches in hill country, looking for some of the secondary. Because one of the things we've run, a lot of this. Some people might not recognize this because maybe they're not running the number of cameras. We have 100 cameras on public ground. So an insane amount of data, but a lot of those older, mature bucks, 5.5 years old and old, like the bucks that we're trying to kill and we can't kill, basically.
Right.
They're using more subtle terrain features than those younger deer. Like they're not going. They'll use a bench, but that bench isn't 8 feet wide.
Right.
It's a secondary bench, maybe a little bit lower, maybe a little bit higher
off
than
the primary trail is what you.
Yeah, they're using secondary terrain features to travel.
Yeah.
And I don't know why that is, but a lot of times when we identify those major terrain features, I'll often throw another camera up on some of those secondary and just kind of prove, where these deer, how are they moving.
Right. So we got a vacuum cleaner behind us.
Don't know if it's picking it up or not.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. It's interesting because I think I started experiencing that in real life this year. I think in the spot that I was hunting in Ohio, because like what I realized after I figured out what was below me a little bit, I realized there was an old logging road that was completely grown over, and I was like, man, I guarantee you there's bucks that are skirting the camera and also skirting me by using that road below me, because all the doe activity you were typically seeing was up top along this, along the top of this ridge. And I was seeing bucks up there, right? But it just made me start thinking, like, how many am I not seeing? Because the secondary kind of travel feature or terrain feature is, 15 yards below me, and there's no way I could see it from where I was at, right? And they could completely skirt the camera.
Yeah. When do you guys think is the best time to find those secondary trails? Is it postseason scouting or still that early season? Or
I think postseason scouting is part of that, but I also think that happens over time. Like
you figure it out over time,
well, I think it's historical trail camera data. Like
I see.
And a lot of times, if you're not getting photos, you should always be asking yourself questions when you're looking at you shouldn't just be scrolling through your pictures and saying, "Oh, there's a big deer,"
for face value.
Yeah, I mean, you should be asking when, where, why, look at the weather, look at outside influences, look at food sources, look at all that. And then if you're not getting photos, ask yourself the same damn question.
Right.
And if you can put a logical reason why it's not happening, then move your camera somewhere else where you think it is going to happen.
Well, it's the same principle when you're in a stand, right? Especially as a mobile hunter. And this is something I've talked about. I have a problem with of like getting married to a spot because I'm like, I know I'm going to see deer here. I know I'm going to see deer here. I'm seeing deer here. I'm just not seeing the right one, right? It's like, and I shouldn't say I know. I feel like if I just stick with it, like I'm gonna be in the chips, right?
Yeah.
But it's the same idea with a stand as it is a camera. It's like if I'm not seeing anything, I need to be better at going, hey, you know what? I need to make a move because I think I'm getting skirted over this way, right? Same thing with cameras, right? It's like if you think there's a reason why you're not getting camera pictures, that is not outside influences, like moving deer away or like there's pressure or whatever. If it's just like a matter of like how they're using the property differently than what you had originally thought, it's like then you got to move it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's but it was interesting for me to watch that play out from the stand this year because it was a huge learning experience. And now this year, if I hang cameras there, because I know might not be around for Ohio this year, it's like I would definitely be hanging a camera lower there as well to see how often am I getting skirted, right? Because we did have good deer on camera where I did have it hung, but they seemed to elude me whenever I was set up, you know.
Yeah.
So at this point, we've kind of identified the areas that we're going to be hanging cameras. We're focusing on the travel corridors and stuff. Are you doing anything at this point, to start to identify, hang cameras, I guess, outside of buck bedding, like identifying that? And what's your kind of rule around how close you're willing to get to that?
Pre-rut, we'll have cameras. Like some of the postseason scouting stuff with us, and this is, backing way up, I guess. If we have historical camera on an area or historical data on a specific deer or an area where we think a deer's bedded, we'll go in there and hang a camera, in the postseason. Lithium batteries, big SD card, long trigger delay, and just let the thing soak for a year.
Right.
And then try to identify that. I am not physically going in October to hang cameras.
Or maybe or find one.
or find one.
Right.
Not that I hunt a big enough piece where I'm not worried about bumping deer because I can go find them again, but it's a lot of work. You know what I mean?
Right.
And sometimes I think that my personal opinion is that you can get away with more than what you really think in certain areas, as long as you have the ability to go find them again. But you're creating more work for yourself. So really at this point, like I'll go in and hang cameras on doe bedding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That time frame. But specific buck bedding, not in hill country. In swamp country, if I see something, absolutely. But typically that's hard transitions. Right.
And that was kind of like, again, that camera that I hung on the public in Ohio this year, it's like I thought I had doe bedding on both sides, right? Mm-hmm. What I assumed, that's why I thought I was seeing what I was seeing when I was hunting that spot in prior years. Mm-hmm. And then when we pulled the camera, it was like just confirmed exactly what we thought. It was like we had does in there at like noon, 11 o'clock, 1:30 eating, and we were like, man, that's why there's bucks around there. That's why that's a primary scrape area, because there's doe bedding all around this spot, so it just all the pieces kind of came together, and it totally made sense from that standpoint. At this point, though, what are you specifically looking for in your trail camera data? You know what I mean? Like, because you've already qualified the parcel and you have some decent bucks on there. Are you specifically looking to see like who now has stuck around, and are they changing their patterns now based on them going hard horned? And so what are you kind of taking away from your intel at this point?
That's part of it. A lot of what I'm looking at is the time of the photo and the direction that they're coming from.
Okay.
I'm looking at, if I get a picture of a deer at 1 o'clock in the morning, he could be a mile away. Mm-hmm. So then, if that's a consistent pattern from a certain direction, then I'm going to cast more cameras in that direction and try to backtrack him. Maybe I get a picture of him at 11 o'clock, and then I confirm that. Then I'm taking it a step further. So I'm trying to kind of leapfrog those cameras to pinpoint bedding, to have hunting opportunities to where, okay, maybe I get that deer on camera half hour after shooting light.
Right.
That's close enough for me. Like, I don't need to be any further, because once that weather front comes, that deer gets up on his feet just a little bit earlier, that's going to be my opportunity. Right. So it's dictated around time.
Right. Is it the same for you, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, those are the big things as far as if I get a killable buck, I'm gonna go and try to slam dunk.
Right.
I don't care what time, if it's season. So
right.
Monitoring those cameras and seizing the moment. And easier said than done. But I mean, ultimately, yeah, trying to correlate why that deer is there at that time, and if he's killable, make a move. But if not, you got some more homework to do.
Right. And I've actually seen it. I don't know if you guys have seen this too, but I've paid a little bit of attention to the wind direction. Like on those days, I'll go back and I'll look at, weather underground or whatever historically, and I'll go back even like 2 years on a deer if I have that much intel on him and figure out like when, what wind directions he's like. But even during that time of the year, it's like I feel like I've seen like the wind direction that they want to travel isn't the consistent intelligence piece that has helped me in the past for whatever reason. It's like especially the swamp this year, it's like I had deer crossing a camera with almost any wind direction, which made me. So let me back up for a second. I was really confused by it at first. I was like, so I thought they were going to move mainly on like a north-northeast wind, right? Because that's what I was getting the original pictures on, right? And then a couple weeks later, I checked, and now it was like a south-southwest wind, right? And I'm like, man, I do not get these deers are willing to move almost any direction. And I talked to Greg Litzinger about it. He says like, dude, I'm baffled. I was like, I don't know which wind to go hunt, like other than like don't hunt the wrong wind to blow into their bedding or whatever. And he said something that just totally made sense to me. He's like, if they're that comfortable where you're at to move on any wind direction, he's like, you're in their bedroom.
Yeah. I was going to say the pressure must be low then.
Yeah.
In that particular area.
Yeah. So have you kind of seen something similar, like as far as like if there are deer that are willing to move almost on any wind?
I necessarily haven't seen that. Correlating some of that back to swamp, I've seen deer bed in the same area on multiple different winds. So it's not in hill country where it's isolated up on that upper 1/3 with their wind at their back. They're getting on some of these islands in the swamp and simply just moving from edge to edge.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
So, now at this point, say we have a buck. I want to kind of shift the perspective here. Say we now have a buck who's a complete homebody. He was on the farm or he was on the public land, on that piece during the summer. He stayed there after he shed velvet. You've talked about leapfrogging, right, to try to get back to a buck. Just give like an example of like places where you might have found a buck, and then like how you kind of leapfrogged and what terrain features you were looking for to kind of make sure you were going to have the best chance to start to pin him down a little bit. You know what I mean? Because when you say leapfrog, it's like I want to make sure people realize it's not just don't move the camera 20 yards or 30 yards down the trail that he's walking on, right? You're trying to find the next significant terrain feature that he's going to use toward where you think he's going to live.
Exactly. So Jake is really, really good about this strategy about setting cameras up on scrapes. And really the goal there is still the same. It's you're gathering inventory. A lot of those, the more bucks that start to use those scrapes, like it's just going to attract other deer. It's social communication site. So a lot like food sources. This time of the year, we're using scrapes to kind of gather that inventory on video mode, looking for the direction of where the deer's traveling, looking at the manner, how they're working licking branch, and how they're, pawing the ground up.
Right.
And then to your point about leapfrogging cameras, we go back to the topographical maps and the aerials and look at hard edge transitions, topographical features, and then by leapfrogging cameras, to your point, we're not moving them 20 yards or 50 yards. We're following those transition areas, boots on the ground scouting to identify, where those deer are maybe coming from. And when we don't want to, I don't like to go too far, because then if you're wrong in what
then you're way wrong.
Then you're way wrong. Now you're starting over and you've lost multiple weeks. So I go as far as I need to, but as far as I can, without second guessing, myself. So sometimes that could be 100 yards. Sometimes that could be, a quarter mile.
Well, yeah, and I think it's important on what the terrain is as well, because if you're talking in terms of legitimate distance yards, there's times where I see deer, they get out of their beds and they trot across, to whatever that is. So definitely look at the map and try to put the pieces together.
Right. And one of the things I see you do that is pretty cool. A lot of times we're talking about big terrain features,
right?
Saddles, benches, hard edges, but sometimes those deer will follow a little ditch that's 2 feet deep.
And that's even the pieces of public that I'm hunting, the places where I kill my deer.
Right.
There's a reason why I'm killing them, because no one else wants to hunt there.
Right.
They're like, this is stupid. It's
right.
Like, I'm happy to sit out there and look like an idiot because I killed deer.
Right. I know. There was a spot we had that was along the road 2 years ago when we were hunting in the south or whatever. And you were like, I won't sit there because it just doesn't feel right. It's like 100 yards off the road. I was like, dude, I will sit there, no problem. It's an easy hike
no
in.
shame.
Now, I did see one buck. We just had a tough year that year in general, but we did have good deer on that scrape leading up to us getting there.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? But, we found out there were some other circumstances that were at play that we weren't aware of while we were hunting. But so, all right, so we're almost wrapped up here. We talked about scrape inventory. Are we looking at like signpost rub inventory as well? Like, if you find something like that, are you willing to hang there, or is water playing into the mix here, especially being early season? If the temps are high, are you looking at some like water sources possibly as well?
Yeah, water. I mean, that's something that I probably need to do a better job of personally. Water sources can be a great tool, especially with those hot temps. Early October, and with the signpost rubs, that's something I really haven't done a whole lot of. That's something boots on the ground scouting. Like, you're always looking for that sign, but historically I've never really used cameras in that manner to really identify, what deer is actually caught, what deer is actually making that sign.
Right.
But that's something that I want to do more of.
Right.
So,
even talking to Greg yesterday, how his strategy with rubs in general is pretty eye-opening. And I do hang some cameras. It's over a primary trail, and I've had bucks, a particular buck, really big buck,
right,
down at the day, sent up the same tree and rubbed the same. So the previous year, he scented it up, put his head on there, he scented it up, smelled it. And then this year, the deer that was living in that ditch was 4.5 this year, and he's a little more dominant, and he was running around like crazy. This year, he shredded that tree.
Right, okay,
so,
nice.
I mean, that's historical data 365, right? Like,
down to almost a day.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
wow. Okay.
and I posted on Instagram, and I put a little poll, and there's some people that said no. I was like, I think he'll be back down to the day.
Right.
And he's alive right now, and I feel really good. Should have a chance to kill him.
That's awesome. Which one was that? Was that
that big 8-pointer?
That big 8-pointer?
Yeah.
Nice. All right, man. Well, I think, fellas, that concludes part number 2, talking about early season and a little bit of pre-rut. And then thanks for coming on, and I'm looking forward to part 3.
Always, man.
Appreciate it.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. We would like to thank Chad and Jake for joining us. Be sure to visit them at ExodusOutdoorGear.com and follow them on Instagram and Facebook. We'd, of course, like to thank all of you for listening, and if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. It'd be super rad if you could do those 2 things for us. Before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners that continue to help us make this podcast possible. Wicked Tree Gear, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Trophy Ridge, Ozonics, Obsession Bows, Tecumseh Seed, Glacier Coolers, Ramcat Broadheads, Trophy Taker Rests, Dead Downwind, and Skull Brew Coffee Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
Makes me proud, makes me steal. I could show